achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on the heels of last night's UFC Fight Night 58 event, the UFC 2014 calendar is complete just before Christmas arrives, and I thought with 2 weeks off before UFC 183, why not do a little bit of year-end review or year recap and a little bit of prognostication for UFC 150, for the year 2015. So what you're going to get on this show is I'm going to hand out my awards, which I will go through momentarily, at least all the categories. I will also give you my predictions for each division and a couple future predictions just pertaining to the UFC and fighting in general. Obviously, I'm going to focus on the UFC here, despite the fact there's some other pretty good fighters and good organizations around the world that probably deserve my attention. Unfortunately, I don't have enough of it to give to you. On this show, prediction-wise, I'll be giving you, I'm Canadian, so why not? I'll be giving you my Canadian Fighter of the Year, Future Star of the Year, and again, I'll explain these a little bit more when I get to them. Submission of the Year, Knockout of the Year, Upset of the Year, Comeback Fighter of the Year, Breakout Fighter of the Year, Future Contender of the Year, Champion of the Year, Fight of the Year, and ultimately Fighter of the Year. I know it's a lot of people to break down. I'll give you my 4 nominations, and then my winner. These categories were put together by a panel of 1, myself, after going through Wikipedia, starting at the first fight of last year, and going all the way through the end. If I do miss a fighter, or a fight, or something significant you think I should have covered, please feel free to post it in the comments below, tactfully as always. And again, I always thank you guys for tuning in and listening. And let's get to the first award, actually. Let's get to the first one. The first award I'm going to be handing out is Canadian of the Year, and the only qualification is you must be a Canadian-born fighter to receive or be nominated and receive this award. The 4 nominees are Mitch Gagnon, who went 2-1 this year, recently fought Renan Barão, actually last night fought Renan Barão, did fairly well for fighting a former champion, and he moved into the top 15 of the bantamweight division. Number 2, Rory McDonald went 3-0 with wins over Damian Maia, Tyrone Woodley, and a TKO over former Strikeforce champion Tarek Saffiedine, and he's won himself a future title shot. Jordan Meehan, who went 2-0 with 2 pretty solid wins, including a very quick TKO victory over Mike Pyle, and finally Chad Laprise, who also went 2-0 this year, winning the Ultimate Fighter Nations and defeating Yosena Cedeno in his lightweight debut. The runner-up for this award is Jordan Meehan, but as many people would expect, the winner of this award is Rory McDonald because of what he did. 3-0 is pretty impressive over some pretty good talent, and he's got himself a title shot in the not-too-distant future as a result. So congratulations, Rory McDonald, my Canadian Fighter of the Year. To keep things interesting, I'm going to alternate between awards and division prognostications. The first one is the newly founded strawweight division. The current champion Carla Esparza winning the Ultimate Fighter 20 to capture the title over Rose Namajunas. The next title shot appears to be Joanna, and I'm going to butcher this. I don't know. Joanna, Double J, we're going to call her, will be in the next title shot in the not-too-distant future. Future contenders for the division, Claudia Gadelha, I think, can get back in there. Jojo Calderwood will probably get a shot at some point in 2015. Randa Marcos, already the built-in storyline, could very well earn her a shot, especially would be a little bit of drawing power in Canada if that fight were to take place. And currently non-UFC fighter, but Jessica Aguilera, the number 1 ranked strawweight in the planet, currently under the World Series of Fighting banner, I think has a great opportunity to get a title shot if she comes in. She actually already holds a win over Carla Esparza. I think World Series of Fighting is on its way out. I think Aguilera makes her debut in the UFC in the 2015. And my prediction for the 2015 champion, I think Jessica Aguilera actually will get a shot at probably Carla Esparza eventually and will take the title from the strawweight champion. So by the end of 2015, Jessica Aguilera will be holding the strawweight championship. My next award is the Future Star of the Year, so either a very young fighter in age or in MMA experience that is climbing the ladder in their respective division, but still kind of flying under the radar as far as a future title challenger. The 4 nominees are Aljamain Sterling, who went 2-0. He's only 25 years old. He went 2-0 in 2014 with 2 pretty solid victories, including a TKO win over Hugo Viana. Pedro Munoz, who's 28, who went 2-1 in the UFC, a decision loss to top-ranked Rafael Assunção, and then back-to-back pretty impressive finishes in his next 2 fights. Number 3 is Max Holloway, who surprisingly is just 23 years old. He's 7-3 overall, including a very impressive 2014 that saw him go with 4 victories, no losses, all of his fights ending inside the distance. And finally, Betchko Hayda in the UFC's bantamweight division. She's 31, but she went 3-0 in 2014. She's 3-0 in the UFC, went 2-0 in 2014 with a TKO win over Shayna Baszler and decision win over Jessamine Duke. And she's targeting Ronda Rousey. It's kind of come out of nowhere. As much as I like all 4 of these fighters, and I think Aljamain Sterling is my runner-up for this because he's young and he showed such improvement, Max Holloway is clearly my future star of the year. He's been very impressive. He's climbing quickly. He's already kind of had a taste of top-ranked competition, but I expect big things from Max Holloway in 2015. Our next division we're going to take a look at is the women's bantamweight division, currently owned by the only champion we've ever seen in the UFC, Ronda Rousey. Her next opponent, next challenger, will be Kat Zingano, set to take place at UFC 184 if everyone makes it there healthy. Future contenders that they could see fighting for the belt in 2015. I think Sarah McMahon could work herself back to a title shot probably further down the road. I think if the UFC is looking to inject some new faces into the division, into the title scene, Jessica Ai is a possibility if she can get another win or two, coming off a pretty impressive win on her own, to build upon. Betchko Hayda certainly has that resume, at least beating a couple of Ronda Rousey's teammates. If she can get a big win over a big name fighter like a Miesha Tate, maybe that could certainly earn her a shot. And finally, Holly Holm, which could be the fight we're building towards. I'd like to see Holly Holm fight twice this year before she works her way into a title shot. Show what she can do. Show that maybe take on a grappler and defend the wrestling, the grappling aspect of it, and work her striking before she gets a shot at Ronda Rousey. Please don't rush her. It's too bad she had to drop out because of injury from her last fight. In the end, 2015, the champion I think we'll be talking about, barring injury or her walking away as a result of other opportunities, I still have Ronda Rousey ruling the women's bantamweight division. Our third award is Submission of the Year. I don't need to delve into what this award would entail. The first candidate or nominee, OSP, defeating Nikita Krylov via Von Fluchoke, UFC 171. Up next, Ben Saunders defeating Chris Heatherly via Omoplata at UFC Fight Night 49. Luke Rockhold defeating Tim Boach via modified Kimura submission. It was a very unique submission hold at UFC 172. And number 4 is Charles Oliveira defeating Hatsu Aoki by modified Anaconda choke at UFC Fight Night 43. And my winner for Submission of the Year is Charles Oliveira. His victory over Hatsu Aoki, both the method, which is a very impressive submission, and the person he submitted, Hatsu Aoki, a talented grappler. So that way, Oliveira, this I think is the best submission of the year. My runner-up was Ben Saunders defeating Chris Heatherly by omoplata because we'd never seen an omoplata before, but I still think the talent and the submission hold, the combination, the Oliveira winner gets him the nod as the best submission of 2014. We move now to the flyweight division, and the current champion of that division, as everyone knows, is the only champion that we've ever seen in the UFC, Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. Currently, there's no next title shot lined up, unless something's been announced recently that I haven't picked up on. Future contenders, John Dodson is out with injury. I think he will definitely get a 2015 title shot as a real possibility. I wouldn't mind seeing him fight once more, coming back from the injury to kind of get back in the groove of things. Ian McCall, John Lineker scheduled to face off, and I think the winner of that could very well earn themselves a title shot as well. Ian McCall, obviously a history with Johnson. Lineker trying to work his way up. Making weight obviously been an issue for him. And Kyoji Horiguchi is certainly someone who has got his name in the mix with a pretty successful run so far since debuting in the UFC. He could be a guy near the end of the year who they're looking to match up with the champion if he can put another win or two together. At the end of 2015, my champion, though, is still Demetrius Johnson. I think he holds on to the title. If anyone could knock him off, it could be John Dodson if he can work on that cardio and not fade like he did in the first fight, but I still have DJ holding on to the flyweight title. Our next award is the Knockout of the Year award, which is always a fun award to give out. There were a lot of knockouts this year. I've broken it down to these 4. Again, if you come across a knockout that I missed and you think I should have included, please post it in the comments below. My 4 nominees are Mark Hunt defeating Roy Nelson at UFC Fight Night 52, Abel Trujillo stopping Jamie Varner in a pretty impressive and violent-looking battle at UFC 169, and number 3, Dong Young Kim stopping John Hathaway with a spinning back fist at the Ultimate Fighter China finale, and number 4, Ronda Rousey defeating Alexis Davis at UFC 175, catching her early with a shot, throwing her, and finishing her off with some subsequent ground strikes. All very impressive knockouts. There were a ton of knockouts that easily could have been in this category. My runner-up for the award here is Dong Young Kim knocking out John Hathaway, simply because Kim wasn't known for his knockout power. It was a pretty brutal spinning back fist, and was turning out to be a pretty entertaining fight, and putting down a guy like Hathaway had never been knocked out before. But my winner of Knockout of the Year goes to none other than Mark Hunt, the Super Samoan, for defeating Roy Nelson, absolutely obliterating him, one punch walking away. A guy like Nelson who's never been put down before like that. Pretty darn impressive, and obviously it got Mark Hunt a shot at the title, so both what happened in the cage and what the fight meant outside of the cage, all significant. So congratulations, Mark Hunt, the Knockout of the Year award winner. Up next, we'll take a look at the UFC's bantamweight division, a division that was formerly considered kind of stagnant as far as title contenders were concerned. It's now become incredibly interesting. The current champion, of course, TJ Dillashaw. His next title shot, I don't think the date's been named, but he'll be facing the man who formerly held the title until he was stripped of it in Dominic Cruz. That should be a fantastic matchup. Future contenders that are on the docket: obviously, Renan Barao, who just defeated Mitch Gagnon last night. Spoiler alert, obviously, if you didn't watch that show. But he defeated Renan Barao. Will probably get the winner of that matchup. Rafael Assunção, with his win over TJ Dillashaw, feels very much like he deserves a shot at an opportunity to fight for the title as well, and could in the not-too-distant future. And Uriah Faber, I know for a fact, that if Dominic Cruz wins the title, I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming if Dominic Cruz wins the title at some point, they'll probably try and match him with Faber and get that rubber match and give Uriah one more opportunity to capture a title. Now, 2015, who will be the champion at the end of the year? I'm going to say Dominic Cruz. I think he beats TJ Dillashaw. I think he beats Renan Barão. And whether he faces Faber or Sunspot after that, I think he beats one of them too. If he stays healthy, obviously. But I think Dominic Cruz, if he comes back, will be the UFC's bantamweight champion at the end of next year. Our next award goes to the upset of the year. And I would love to claim that I called all of these upsets. Unfortunately, I only predicted one of these 4 upsets that actually took place. But what I'll do is I'll give you the betting odds as posted at bestfightodds.com or bestfightingodds.com at when they were at their peak. So the first nominee, TJ Dillashaw, paying $8.65 to defeat Renan Barão, the UFC's bantamweight champion at the time, who paid $1.08. That took place at UFC 173. The next upset was Fabricio Verdum, paying $3.15, defeating Travis Brown, who paid $1.45. That took place at UFC on Fox 11. The third nominee was Anthony Rumble Johnson, returning to the UFC at $3.20, defeating Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis, who paid $1.47. That took place at UFC 172. And the final upset, which is the only one out of the 4 that I actually predicted, Rafael dos Anjos paying $5.49 to defeat former lightweight champion Benson Henderson at $1.26. That took place at UFC Fight Night 49. And I do have Rafael dos Anjos winning over Benson Henderson as my runner-up for upset of the year, but I think it's pretty indicative of with just the values by themselves that TJ Dillashaw at $8.65 defeating, and not just defeating, stopping Renan Barão, formerly thought to be one of the top fighters on the planet. TJ Dillashaw wiped out Renan Barão to capture the bantamweight champion. That is my upset of the year. Now taking a look at the featherweight division, the current champion is Jose Aldo, who's coming off a title defense against Chad Mendes. The current next shot is still up in the air, even though we have a couple ideas who it could be. Future contenders, former title challenger and former lightweight champion Frankie Edgar certainly could find a shot in 2015. Conor McGregor's the other option. A lot of people figure if he gets by Dennis Seaver, especially in impressive fashion, he will probably be paired up with the champion next. He's certainly a future contender. Then you have a list of 3 guys who've all fought Aldo before. Cub Swanson, Chad Mendes, and Ricardo Lamas. I think of the 3, because Lamas' fight took place in the WEC before the title shot, if he can get a couple wins, he might find himself in a title shot opportunity. I don't think Lamas, even with a couple big wins, will get himself back there anytime soon. Mendes could by the end of the year with an impressive run. I'd like to see Mendes and Lamas actually duke it out in a title eliminator bout. The end of 2015, though, and I'm going to take a little bit of a chance here. I actually have Conor McGregor holding the featherweight title. I think with the power and the fact that I think Aldo's losing maybe a half a step and became much more hittable against Chad Mendes, I think Conor McGregor has the ability to put Aldo down and really put it on him. So my prediction is that Conor McGregor will upend Jose Aldo and capture the featherweight title at some point in 2015. Our next award we're going to hand out is the Comeback Fighter of the Year. So this is going to a fighter that either appeared to be done or at least headed downward in their career and were able to turn it around to some extent. My four nominees are, first up, Andrei Arlovski, who made his UFC return this year, the former champion. That at one point he was getting knocked out on a fairly regular basis. He came back with a split decision win over Brendan Schaub and then KO'd Bigfoot Silva in a second fight and is suddenly getting some talk as a future potential title contender. The next one on my list, former bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz, who returned after a 3-year layoff and getting stripped of his title and destroyed pretty competent opponent Takeya Mizugaki in just over a minute. My next nominee is Neil Magny, who had 2 losses at the end of 2013. Sure, Magny's not a top welterweight contender. After 2 straight losses at the end of 2013, the guy went 5-0 in 2014 with some pretty solid wins over pretty noteworthy names and got himself certainly climbing the rankings, whether you want to admit it or not. And finally, my last nominee is Robbie Lawler, who went 3-1 this year. Started the year with a loss to Johnny Hendricks, the welterweight title on the line, and then picked up 3 straight wins that included capturing the welterweight title and a rebound victory over Hendricks. My runner-up is actually Neil Magny, because I feel Andrei Arlovski and Dominic Cruz really are on the right path but haven't really made the total comeback yet. Magny seems to have rebounded from a pretty weak start and started to climb back up from actually a terrible, tough season. Has made a name for himself. Obviously, my winner of the year for comeback fighter is Robbie Lawler. Beat some pretty impressive names in Jake Ellenberger, Matt Brown, and then eventually Johnny Hendricks to capture the title. Was also a part of a very, very big fight in his first fight of the year, which he lost the title. So congratulations to comeback fighter of the year, ruthless Robbie Lawler, the UFC welterweight champion. Now taking a look at the UFC's lightweight division, the champion is currently Anthony Showtime Pettis, just defended his title for the first time, defeating Gilbert Melendez. His next opponent appears to be Rafael dos Anjos at a time and date not yet determined. Future contenders along with the Brazilian Khabib Nurmagomedov, a lot of people feel should get the next shot. I would like to see Nurmagomedov fight one more time, at least coming off a lengthy injury stay, get him back in the groove before he gets in there with the champion. Give him a high-profile bout, and certainly see if we can get there. Donald Cerrone and Miles Jury are next on the list as future contenders. Obviously, the winner of that will take a big step up and could get a shot close to the end of the year. And I still have Benson Henderson and TJ Grant as kind of dark horse contenders. Guys with a couple of wins could work themselves back into contention. But obviously this number of contenders, with Anthony Pettis as your champion, with his way of sitting out a whole year at a time, sometimes with an injury, only fighting once, we might not see a lot of lightweight belts title fights this year. Hopefully that changes from what we saw in 2014 and years prior. The 2015 champion, though, this time, I think it's going to be Anthony Showtime Pettis. Khabib Nurmagomedov probably has the best chance of knocking him off, but I see some defensive striking liabilities that Pettis should be able to capitalize on, despite Nurmagomedov's sambo and grappling background. So I still have Pettis as the champion at the end of 2015, of course, barring an injury that prevents him from either competing or costs him in the cage. So Anthony Pettis still my lightweight champ. My next award goes to the Breakout Fighter of the Year, and to win this award, what you needed to have done is really come from nowhere, at least a far lesser standing, and really made a name for yourself this year, and have suddenly become someone in the UFC and the fans are talking about. My nominees are Rafael dos Anjos. Again, he went 3-1 this year after losing to Khabib Nurmagomedov. TKO over Jason Hyde, KO over Ben Henderson, and a one-sided decision over Nate Diaz, earning a title shot. Number 2, Conor McGregor went 2-0 this year with 2 first-round stoppages of Diego Brandao and Dustin Poirier. Number 3, Breakout Fighter of the Year, TJ Dillashaw, who went 3-0, defeating Mike Easton, stopping Henan Brow, and defending his title against Joe Soto, which is pretty darn impressive. And number 4, Kelvin Gastelum is my 4th nominee. He went 3-0 this year and fought some pretty good competition in Brick Story, Nico Masoki, and the submission over Jake Ellenberger. And that coming from a guy who was the last pick on his season, The Ultimate Fighter, and now he's being talked about as a future title contender at welterweight. The runner-up is Rafael dos Anjos. He's earned himself a title shot out of nowhere. And my winner, though, for Breakout Fighter of the Year is, not shocking, TJ Dillashaw, who captured the title and, again, defeated Henan Barrow. So not only did he pull off the upset of the year, he's also my Breakout Fighter of the Year. So congratulations to TJ Dillashaw. Next up, we're at the UFC 170-pounders for the welterweight division. The current champion, already award winner tonight, Robbie, the ruthless one, Robbie Lawler. Pretty darn impressive so far. The next title shot probably will go to either Johnny Hendricks or Rory McDonald. It hasn't been determined yet. I think it's going to be Hendricks, but I wouldn't be shocked to see Rory McDonald get in there either. Future contenders, obviously the other one, either Hendricks or McDonald, who doesn't get the shot, will be the next contender after that. Carlos Condit, Hector Lombard, and the aforementioned Kelvin Gastelum will all be in the conversation this year. And you could see someone else rise to the ranks, as there's a lot of talent. And of course there's a name absent from my list, and I'll talk about that later. At the end of 2015, I still have Robbie Lawler as the champion. The reason being is I think he might only fight twice this year, and he could fight against Johnny Hendricks and then Rory McDonald. He already owns victories over both. And I think stylistically, Hector Lombard and Kelvin Gastelum both pose interesting problems for Robbie. But I think he remains the champion, but I wouldn't be shocked to see it change hands a couple of times, as there is a lot of talent in the welterweight division. Our next award goes to the Future Contender of the Year, and this goes to a fighter who used 2014 to put themselves into title contention, probably haven't got the green seal of approval yet to be hooked up with the champion like Rafael dos Anjos has been, but they are on the cusp of it based on what they did in 2014. My 4 nominees are the number 5 ranked middleweight on the planet, Luke Rockhold, the former Strikeforce champion. He went 3-0 in 2014, defeating Costa Filippo, Tim Boach, and Michael Bisping, all inside the distance. My second nominee, Canadian Rory McDonald, number 2 ranked at welterweight. He also went 3-0, defeating Damian Maia, Tyrone Woodley, and Tarek Safadine. He's already been talked about as a future title shot, but he might have to wait now with Johnny Hendricks getting in there again. My number 3 nominee is Anthony Rumble Johnson, ranked number 3 at light heavyweight, certainly injecting some much-needed life into the division. He went 2-0, upsetting Phil Davis and absolutely obliterating Little Nog. He also had a KO of Mike Kyle earlier in the year, fighting under the World Series of Fighting banner. And my 4th nominee at middleweight, number 6th ranked Yoel Romero, who went 3-0 with TKO wins over Brunson and Tim Kennedy, along with the decision win over Brad Tavares. These are all 4 fighters who could very well be fighting for the title later this year. My runner-up for Future Contender of the Year is Luke Rockhold. He had an impressive run. But my winner of Future Contender of the Year is Rory McDonald. I think he'll fight for the title in the not-too-distant future. Probably mid to late summer is probably when he'll get his opportunity to bring the welterweight title back to Canada. He had a pretty good year, and taking out a former Strikeforce champion in Tarek Safadine and a guy like Tyrone Woodley, who was on the rise the same way, pretty darn impressive. So congratulations, Rory McDonald. You are the Future Contender of the Year. Now time for our middleweight division prognostication. The current champion, Chris Weidman, his next title shot, or at least next opponent he'll be putting his title on the line against, will be Vitor Belfort at UFC 184. Should be a fairly interesting fight nonetheless. Future contenders in the division, Jacare Souza, former Strikeforce champion, another former Strikeforce champion, Luke Rockhold, also Yoel Romero, and Lyoto Machida with that impressive win of TJ Dillon over CB Dalloway last night, put himself back in the conversation. Well, I think Jacare Souza, Luke Rockhold, all the guys offer the champion, and along with Vitor Belfort, some interesting matchups. I still think Chris Weidman will be your champion at the end of 2015. He just offers too much, and unless he's a slip-up or some kind of backstep, which I don't see happening, I think he will be the next, he will hold on to the title through 2015. So we just talked about future contenders. Now I'm going to give you my Champion of the Year award. Obviously, you have to be a champion at some point, and preferably still be the champion at this point in time to be able to be nominated for this award. My 4 nominees are the UFC's flyweight champion Demetrious Johnson, who went 2-0 this year with a decision win over Ali Bogatinov and a submission win over Chris Carriasso. The women's bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey, who also went 2-0 with a TKO victory over Sarah McMahon and a KO victory over Alexis Davis. She fought for just a total of 1 minute and 22 seconds this year in her 2 fights, which is darn impressive. My 3rd nominee, Jose Aldo, the champion of the featherweight division, who went 2-0, defeating Ricardo Lamas and Chad Mendes, both by decision. And my 4th nominee, Chris Weidman, who had just 1 fight, but it was a damn good fight, defeating the former light heavyweight champion in Lyoto Machida. My runner-up for this title is Jose Aldo, because he looked darn impressive in his fight against Ricardo Lamas, even though it wasn't the finish everybody was looking for, and fended off pretty much the number 2 featherweight on the planet in Chad Mendes in the rematch. But my winner of the Champion of the Year goes to the women's bantamweight champion Ronda Rousey, because she obliterated 2 people who were expected to be, especially Sarah McMahon, were expected to be significant challenges to her title, and she took them out in emphatic fashion. So my Champion of the Year award goes to Ronda Rousey. We have 2 divisions left, and the next one is the UFC's light heavyweight division. The current champion, John Jones, one of the longest tenured champions in the UFC, and his next title shot is the next prediction show I'll be doing at UFC 182, where he'll be taking on former Strikeforce heavyweight Grand Prix winner and Olympic wrestler Daniel Cormier. Future contenders, obviously the rematch with Alexander Gustafsson is on the docket should he get through Cormier. Anthony Rumble Johnson will be facing Gustafsson up next. Probably will get a shot at the title, depending whether he loses or wins against Gustafsson. He should be able to string together a couple of wins to earn himself that opportunity. And finally, question mark beside Rashad Evans' name. He could get himself back in contention if he were to put something impressive together. A couple wins if they are needing contenders. As far as the 2015 champion is concerned, I'm going to pass on this one. I'm not going to give you an answer simply because my prediction show will be coming up very shortly, and I don't want to give away whether I think John Jones retains the title, whether I think Daniel Cormier is able to unseat the champion. Either way, I don't want to give that away, so 2015 will remain a mystery, at least for the time being. We only have 2 awards left to give out, and this one will go to Fight of the Year, and there were a ton of fights. This was a tough decision, and as I was going through each event, I kept crossing out and eliminating fights and replacing them with other ones that I felt, but really it was a very difficult task simply to narrow it down to 4. My 4 nominees are the UFC 171 event between Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler to crown the new welterweight champion after George St-Pierre left the promotion. My number 2 nominee is Matt Brown taking on Eric Silva at UFC Fight Night 40, and it was a barn burner of an event, very impressive. My number 3 nominee was Chris Weidman, making his first non-Anderson Silva title defense of the middleweight title at UFC 175. Yes, he defended the title against Anderson Silva. I'm saying non-Anderson Silva, which is very significant, against the light heavyweight champion Lyoto Machida. And my number 4 fight of the year was also a title fight, is Jose Aldo defending his featherweight title against Chad Mendes at UFC 179 in a very back-and-forth bout that proved the champion was both human, but at the same time had a lot of heart. My runner-up for the fight of the year goes to Weidman Machida, as Chris Weidman proved a lot of the doubters wrong, beating a very difficult and so far undefeated middleweight, at least when not fighting in title shots, so very darn impressive there. But he is the runner-up for Fight of the Year. My Fight of the Year winner is the UFC 171 main event between Johnny Hendricks and Robbie Lawler. I picked Robbie Lawler to win that. That fight came down to the final round. Johnny Hendricks did take it home, and of course we know Lawler subsequently won the title back, but a very impressive matchup, so congratulations to those 2 guys. That was my Fight of the Year. So our final division is the UFC's heavyweight division. The current champion, Cain Velasquez, reigning over what is arguably one of the more dried up divisions, but I think there's some potential going into 2015. The next title shot will most likely go to Fabricio Verdum, the current interim champion, and that should be a fairly interesting fight. as we get to see Kane perform against someone not named Bigfoot or Sagano. Future contenders, I think Travis Brown is probably a win or two away, maybe a win away based on the depth of the division for getting a shot at the champion if Cain Velasquez always stays healthy. It's a moot point if he does not. Stipe Miocic with that impressive performance against Junior Dos Santos, that first time going 5 rounds, hopefully cleans up his cardio a little bit. Obviously, that's a must against a guy like Cain Velasquez if that's who he does fight. I think he could contend with the title with maybe a pair of wins in 2015. I think Mark Hunt is on the cusp as well. Again, talking about shallow division, as he could work himself back into contention, especially after a pretty solid showing against Fabricio Verdum. And the wild card in this division is Brock Lesnar. Is he coming back? Will the UFC, consider putting him in with Cain Velasquez after a win or two, or will they hold off if he does return and let him build up, put 3 or 4 wins together before throwing him in there? But my 2015 champion as of right now in the heavyweight division is Cain Velasquez. Of course, barring him getting stripped of the title, I think he has too much for Fabricio Verdum, and I think he has too much for the other title challengers. I think Cain leaves 2015 with his title firmly wrapped around his waist. We move now to our final award, an award you guys have all been waiting for since 5 minutes ago, or I guess 20 minutes ago at this point, when you saw that I posted an award show video. My Fighter of the Year actually has 8 nominees. I'll quickly go through them. We have, and I'll give you the breakdown. Obviously, we've talked about some of them already. Former Strikeforce champion Luke Rockhold went 3-0 this year with 3 finishes of pretty talented opposition. Number 2 nominee Conor McGregor, 2-0 this year with 2 first-round stoppages in his corner. Fabricio Verdum, the new UFC heavyweight interim champion, went 2-0, upset Matt Brown, TKO victory over Mark Hunt, pretty darn impressive. My 4th nominee, the new UFC welterweight champion Robbie Lawler, 3-1, 4 very impressive fights, 3 impressive victories, knocking off big-time opposition. My number 5 nominee is the UFC's bantamweight champion, TJ Dillashaw, went 3-0, upset Renan Barão, the biggest upset of the year, and coming off a pretty solid victory over Joe Soto, defending his title. My number 6 nominee is Carla Esparza, who some people might cringe at being here. She only went 1-0 in her in 2014 with just 1 fight in UFC, but she won the inaugural strawweight title over Rose Namajuanis. She also beat Jessica Penne and Tisha Torres in unofficial fights in The Ultimate Fighter, and anytime you have to go through a 16, in this case, woman tournament to capture a title, that's pretty darn impressive. So Carla Esparza, I think, deserves to be here. Very, good for her, even though I'm not a huge fan of her personally. Number 7, Ronda Rousey, absolute fight of the year. Her 2 wins were very impressive, as I mentioned. Less than a minute and a half of total fight time and 2 title defenses against 2 very game opponents. And my 8th nominee for Fighter of the Year, Rafael dos Anjos, went 3-1, rebounded from an early win to pick up back-to-back wins, including stopping the former champion Benson Henderson, and a big decision victory over Nate Diaz, earning himself a title shot in the process. My runner-up for Fighter of the Year was TJ Dillashaw because of his huge upset and impressive run through the year. But my number one winner, if that makes any sense, drum roll please, not shockingly enough, goes to the new UFC welterweight champion Robbie Lawler to go 3-1, to rebound like he did. Beating Matt Brown, beating Matt Brown, who was equally who's rising up the division, was pretty darn impressive. Stopping Jake Ellenberger was, a solid feat, and then coming back to beat Johnny Hendricks the way he did, even though it wasn't the best fight Lawler could have fought. Nonetheless, Robbie Lawler is my Fighter of the Year and the first, potentially only, award show I've ever done, or will do. So those are my award winners and future prognostications for each division. Obviously, my opinion means squat. It is just that, my opinion. So if you disagree, please feel free to respectfully and in an intelligent manner disagree and fire out what you have to say with regard to award winners, who I left out, who I forgot, who I should have given it to, who I shouldn't have even nominated. I want to give a couple quick prognostications in the future of MMA, at least some things I see happening, and we'll go from there. First and foremost, World Series of Fighting, I see that shutting down in 2015. I think Bellator, in an attempt to build some depth, will snap up many of its fighters. That's guys like Kuzma, Paul Harris, John Fitch, Jake Shields, Yushin Okami. Some of those guys could get to find themselves under Bellator's reign. I think Marlon Moraes and Justin Gaethje are 2 big fish that the UFC will look to target, but I think if Bellator could grab one or both of them, it would make things very interesting as far as where the best, we already know the UFC has the best overall fighters and probably some of the best depth, but there are still some pretty good guys out there, and that would be a big coup for Bellator. Secondly, I think Bellator is going to sign a few UFC cast-offs as they get cut. And I think they're going to target some of the few big free agents that come up. I think Kung Lee could be a guy who fights in Bellator after he gets his release from the UFC. But I think they're going to target a few guys like they did with Gilbert Melendez, potentially come up short in their bid to land them. But I think finally at the end of the year they might land a bigger name, maybe disgruntled UFC fighter whose contract expires and he looks to go elsewhere. That could be very interesting. Now looking at a couple, just individuals. CM Punk's the first one I want to talk about. I don't think he's going to fight Cathal Pendred. I think he's going to fight someone still developing and very raw. The UFC recognizes they want to get this guy a win and get him going, get people interested, maybe draw on some people who normally wouldn't watch the UFC. Again, remember, this fight has to be sanctioned. Getting an 0-0 fighter with no amateur experience taking on a guy who's got as many fights as Cathal Pendred does, I think CM Punk will probably get a guy who he can beat and is certainly more at his similar stage in his career. Up next, Nate Diaz. I think he either signs with Bellator or most likely takes a prolonged UFC hiatus like Nick did. I don't think he's going to take very well to the type of criticism Dana offered. I think he might fight one more time and then potentially get cut as a result of his performance and then go elsewhere or just shut it down altogether. For Ben Askren, another fighter who's always on the radar, I think he'll continue to take online jabs at the UFC, and I think he'll continue to fight outside of the UFC, probably still in ONE FC. I just don't see him being the type of guy who will eventually buy into Dana's attempt to lure him in by saying he doesn't want to fight here. I think Ben will just stay where he is and continue to do what he does. Anderson Silva, now we're getting into some of the bigger names. I think we'll see him, we know he's going to fight Nick Diaz if everything holds up. I think you'll see fight a handful of special feature bouts over 2015, maybe after the Diaz fight. Maybe he'll take on Michael Bisping, maybe a match with Vitor Belfort, maybe at 205 against the newly returned Rampage Jackson, if that does actually take place. I think he will be coaxed by money and Dana's persistence into a late 2015, early 2016 title shot, knowing it's a big money maker for the promotion. If he keeps winning, obviously, I don't know what chance he stands against Chris Weidman at this point in time, but I think that's where Anderson Silva goes this year. Up next for George St-Pierre, another one people probably want to hear about as far as what I think, which again means nothing. George St-Pierre, I think he will not return in 2015, either an injury or not wanting to steal Rory McDonald's thunder. I think he recognizes maybe this is Rory's time. He's kind of keyed in as a potential contender here, a title shot in the first half of the year. And I think George realizes if he returns, he will probably push Rory further back down the line. And I think he'll either take some time off, take 2015 off, because he'll say, he got injured again, he's looking to keep training, he's not really interested in coming back. But I think he's maybe hiding some, not being overly happy with the UFC, doesn't want to come out and say it. But either way, I don't see GSP back inside the octagon. I would love to be wrong, but I think that's the way it plays out this year. Now, Brock Lesnar, another very big name. I think he will return on the basis of a massive contract. And the UFC has to throw a ton of money at him, and I think they will because they need to boost those pay-per-view ratings, and he brings it. I think the promotion should give him opponents that have names but aren't as big a threats as the fighters he's fought in the past. Big Country Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve, Gabriel Gonzaga, and Frank Mir, the third installment, are all viable opponents that he could take on and most likely defeat. I think they'll try and pave his way back to getting in the groove and then eventually a title shot. And I think he'll challenge for the title potentially in late 2015, early 2016. Again, it all depends on when he signs. Obviously, I think he'll get a couple of fights before he fights directly for the title. UFC uniforms, I don't think they'll pan out nearly as well for the fighters as the UFC would like to suggest they will. I think we may actually see some lower-level guys who need those sponsors and aren't making the money off the uniforms will jump to Bellator to keep those sponsors and giving them money as opposed to dealing with the uniform situation. Or I think the UFC will find a way to incorporate other sponsors into the current uniform situation to keep people happy, but I think they'll try and do something to make an alteration after the initial setup and not seem like we were wrong, we just made a great new thing the way the UFC likes to do things. The UFC lawsuit, I think it'll lose some steam and kind of disappear for a little bit. I could very well see Wanderlei Silva joining the pursuit of that big golden ticket. Obviously, what does he have to lose at this time? I think we'll hear rumblings of fighters, and especially ex-fighters, not happy with different aspects, bringing up stories where the promotion has certainly done things wrong. And I have a lot of issues with the UFC as far as the way they treat their fighters, but certainly it's not the worst scenario in the world. Interesting to note, the Rampage signing that has come up last night, he's still under contract with Bellator as far as Scott Coker has said, and I think Dana White responding to Coker saying he's still under contract with us. Dana White replied with simply a smiley face. I think it's the UFC trying to prove we don't have a monopoly. They're going to try and say, look, here's a fighter we'd like to have under contract. We've offered him a contract. Clearly we can't have him because another promotion has him. Therefore, we are not a monopoly. So I think that's definitely something they're setting up to make it seem like they don't have the control that these fighters in the lawsuit are claiming they will. Also, another prediction, something I see, Dana's going to say something stupid or call someone stupid and then tell the fans they don't like it, they don't have to watch, because that's probably the easiest prediction I'll make all year, all fights included. A few ideas I have going forth. Bring back knockout and submission of the night. I think that'd be very good. Keep the two performances of the night along with the fight of the night. That creates 5 bonuses. But Dana said, of course, sometimes we don't have a knockout or a submission, so we don't want to, keep that money away from the fighters. Well, here's a big idea. Roll it over. If there's no KO or no submission on this event, double up the next event's bonus for that KO or submission. Keep it adding up, and that'll really give an opportunity for a fighter to make $200,000 with a big performance. I think that'd be very interesting. Also, tournaments, I know it's not going to happen. I love them. But I think it would add interest to some of those fights that involve guys that are not in contention. 8-man tourneys, put $100,000 up for grabs for the winner. Possible shot at a higher-ranked opponent to make a name for yourself, especially if you're a guy who's not on the verge of the top 20. I think that could be very interesting, but again, the UFC not a fan of tournaments, so that's not going to happen. I'd like to see them open up the rankings to the top 20. I just think it gives more validation of some of those matchups, and certainly can add to that. I'd like to see a hiatus from the Ultimate Fighter. Give it a break. Let people breathe a little bit before we start cramming seasons 4 or 5, show after show of the same stuff, just new people down our throats. And finally, I think they should make an effort to make every single card have a second fight on the card that's in the same division as the main event, with at least one, if not two, fighters that could possibly slip up into the main event slot should an injury occur to save that card. Do their best to bulk them up. Injuries are a problem, but do whatever you can to fail safe against events being canceled or at least being diminished. So this obviously took a little longer than I wanted it to, but I thought, I got time, let's throw it together. If you did listen to start to finish, thank you very much, as always, for listening to everything I have to say. Please comment, let me know what you think. It was a very fun year. Did close out the year fairly strong, had our ups, had our downs, as is always the case in MMA, and especially gambling, whatever sport you're dealing with. I really enjoyed this season. 2015 looks like it's going to be a fantastic run, as we have a lot of good fights on the horizon. Hopefully none of them get diminished by injury. We almost know it's a safe bet that some will. Either way, as I've said a million times, I appreciate everyone tuning in and listening, heading over to kamikazeoverdrive.net and partaking in everything going on there. And best to you and your family in the new year in this holiday season. So take care, guys, and I'll talk to you in the not-too-distant future.